I need the money tomorrow, Brandon ordered, sliding the $500,000 debt across the kitchen table. And don't be late. Sarah just smiled. Okay. For hours later, she was at the airport. When he woke to collect the money, he found the house empty and a box. He opened it and screamed. Betrayal, revenge, justice. It begins. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. The garage door rumbled open just after 9, the sound that used to mean Brandon was home from work. That was 7 years ago, before entrepreneur became his permanent title and the Velvet Room became his office. Now it meant he'd finally left whatever poker game had consumed his afternoon. Sarah set down her quarterly reports and bourbon, already knowing the conversation ahead. Through 15 years of marriage, she'd learned to read the signs. The way he parked, too fast, too careless. The particular rhythm of his footsteps, hurried but heavy. The cologne he wore to mask cigarette smoke from the casino. Tonight carried all the tells. He found her in the study, the room she'd claimed after he stopped contributing to the mortgage. Her space now, filled with her achievements. Dealership awards lining the walls. Photos of her shaking hands with mayors and senators. The University of Texas degree that had launched everything. Brandon's presence felt like an invasion. We need to talk. He didn't ask, didn't wait for invitation, just pulled out the chair across from her desk. The chair reserved for employees, vendors, people who worked for Sarah Mitchell. Her husband had somehow migrated from partner to petitioner without either of them acknowledging the shift. Sarah took a slow sip of bourbon, the 25-year Macallan she bought for herself now that Brandon's access to her credit cards had quietly ended. What happened to the cryptocurrency investment? Market correction, temporary setback. His answer came too quick, too rehearsed. That's not why I'm here. The wedding photo on her desk caught the lamplight. 15 years ago at the Four Seasons. Brandon in a tuxedo that still fit back then, before stress eating and sedentary days at card tables added 40 pounds. Sarah in vintage Vera Wang, her mother's pearls, believing she'd found a partner who shared her ambition. That woman seemed like a stranger now. How much? Sarah kept her voice level, though her pulse had already started its familiar acceleration. Brandon produced documents from his laptop bag, spreading them across her desk with the practiced ease of someone who'd made many similar presentations. It's really a timing issue more than anything else. These people, they're not unreasonable, they just have strict deadlines. Brandon, how much? The grandfather clock in the corner ticked through 5 seconds of silence. Outside, suburban Austin continued its Thursday evening routines, oblivious to the marriage ending in Sarah's study. $500,000. He said it like he was ordering coffee. In our account by noon tomorrow. The room tilted slightly. Sarah's migraine, the one that always announced itself behind her left eye during moments of profound stress, began its familiar throb. Not 50,000, not even 200,000. $500,000, delivered with the casual expectation of someone who'd never earned a dollar of it. Sarah stopped, memories flooding unbidden. Teaching Brandon how her business worked, how she'd built it from a single used car lot into Austin's premier dealership group. Their honeymoon in Bora Bora, where he'd disappeared for 6 hours to the resort casino. The first business venture she'd funded at $75,000, watching it evaporate into online poker within 3 months. Sarah, you know I wouldn't ask if there was any other option. His fingers drummed against her desk, a nervous tell that emerged whenever the cards weren't falling his way. The mortgage, the car payments, you know how expensive everything's gotten. Sarah knew, she paid all of it. The $6,000 monthly mortgage on their Westlake home. His Tesla Model S lease, $350 weekly. The country club membership he insisted they needed for networking. Though Sarah did all the actual networking while Brandon networked with the poker dealers in the club's backroom. He stood, walked to her bar without invitation, poured himself 3 fingers of her Macallan. The presumption used to surprise her. Now it barely registered. These aren't bank people we're dealing with, Sarah. His voice dropped to what he probably thought was a threatening register. They're serious individuals. Would hate for this to affect your reputation or the dealership's. The threat hung in the air like his cigarette smoke. Obvious, suffocating, and toxic. Sarah's blood pressure spiked. The migraine exploded from behind her eye across her skull. Her hands gripped the armrests of her chair, the Italian leather she'd bought herself after closing her biggest deal last quarter. "Brandon, you look pale," she wanted to say, watching him drain her scotch in 2 gulps. But she said nothing, just calculated. 15 years of enabling, of rescue, of confusing love with currency. The spreadsheet in her desk drawer had the exact total: $1,247,000 in gambling debts paid since their wedding day. That's when he said the words that sealed everything. "If you loved me, you'd help me. A real wife would protect her husband." The words hung between them like a noose. Brandon knew exactly what he was doing, wielding love like a weapon, transforming marriage vows into financial obligations. He'd perfected this over 15 years, this alchemy of turning intimacy into leverage. "Your mother," Sarah said slowly, remembering the woman who'd warned her on their wedding day, "would tell you to get help." Brandon laughed, setting down Sarah's empty glass with a crack against marble. "Help? I'm asking for help. That's what this is. Help from my wife, my partner, my supposed life companion. 3 failed businesses in 5 years, all fronts for feeding his addiction. The consulting firm that never consulted anyone. The real estate venture in Round Rock that evaporated into casino markers. The cryptocurrency portfolio that somehow lost money during Bitcoin's peak because he'd liquidated it all for a weekend in Vegas." Sarah had funded every single one, watching her money disappear into his delusions. "You missed our anniversary dinner last month," Sarah said, her voice steady despite the rage building. "But you made time for the poker tournament at the Palms. That's not fair." "Fair? Let me understand this, Brandon. You need $500,000 by noon tomorrow. For what exactly?" He shifted his weight, the same tell he'd shown that first time she caught him lying about a weekend trip to Louisiana. The casino players called it a tell, this unconscious revelation of deception. Sarah had become expert at reading them. Business opportunity. Time sensitive. Can't miss this window. You said these were debts to serious people. His knuckles whitened against the desk. It's both. An opportunity to settle debts and invest. 2 birds, 1 stone. The slip was everything. Not debt repayment. Gambling debt settlement combined with more gambling. The same pattern that had consumed their marriage, their finances, her peace of mind. Sarah's left hand started trembling, a new development in her 40s that her doctor attributed to chronic stress. She shoved it in her pocket, feeling the outline of her phone. The phone that contained James Walker's number on speed dial. Her lawyer, her friend, her co-conspirator in tonight's performance. Brandon's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, typed quickly, placed it face down. Another bookie, Sarah knew. Another marker being called. Another lie being constructed. "Sarah, I've supported you through so much. When you were building the business, who stood by you? When the economy tanked in 2020, who helped keep everything together? You were in Cabo that entire summer," Sarah reminded him. "Posted about it daily on Instagram while I worked 16-hour days saving our business. Our business. The one I own. The one your name has never been on. That's ancient history. We're talking about our future. Our life together." The life where Sarah worked 80-hour weeks while Brandon perfected his poker face. Where she closed million-dollar deals while he opened betting accounts. Where she built equity while he destroyed it. Her wedding photo suddenly appeared on the desk. He'd brought it as a prop, removed it from the mantel while she'd been reviewing reports. Staging, performance, manipulation refined over 15 years into an art form. "This isn't just debt, Sarah." Brandon stepped closer, close enough that she could smell the casino on him. Stale smoke, cheap perfume from the cocktail waitresses, desperation. "These are obligations. Serious people with serious consequences. By tomorrow noon, or things get complicated for everyone. Your reputation, the dealerships, that nice country club membership. Are you threatening me in my own house?" Sarah's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "I'm being honest about reality," Brandon said, but his voice wavered. He'd never seen her this angry, this controlled, this finished. "Sarah, please. We need this tomorrow noon. That's not negotiable." The room felt suffocating despite the air conditioning running at 68 degrees. Sarah's migraine pounded with each heartbeat. Brandon's cologne seemed to thicken the oxygen. The grandfather clock chimed 9 times, each note a countdown to liberation. Sarah looked at him. Her husband, who'd become a stranger. The man who'd never been a partner, just a parasite with a marriage license. "Fine." The word came out flat, exhausted. Tomorrow. Now leave. Brandon mistook her exhaustion for capitulation. He reached for her hand. She pulled away. He tried for a kiss. She turned her head. His "I love you" hit empty air as she walked upstairs. Sarah stood at the bedroom window, watching Brandon load his overnight bag into his Tesla. He'd go to his brother's tonight. He always did after successful manipulations, celebrating his victory over the weak wife who could never say no. The taillights disappeared down their street onto Westlake Drive. Sarah waited exactly 5 minutes, then made the first call. James Walker answered on the second ring despite the late hour. 20 years of friendship and legal counsel meant he knew Sarah's patterns. She never called after 9 unless something had shifted. He finally asked for the impossible amount, didn't he? No surprise in his voice, only confirmation. Noon tomorrow. 500,000. Like I'm an ATM, he finally found the maximum withdrawal for. The asset freeze is already programmed, James said. Sarah heard papers shuffling on his end. Midnight activation. Every joint account, every credit card in your name, every line of credit he thinks he can access. What about the house? Never in his name. You know that. You insisted on keeping it solely yours when you bought it before the marriage. Best decision you ever made. Sarah hung up and immediately went to her home office. The room Brandon never entered because it held no interest for gamblers. Just boring business documents, financial records, evidence. The migraine had shifted from explosive pain to cold clarity. Her laptop opened to an email confirmation from 3 weeks ago. Villa Las Palmas, Costa Rica. March 17th through April 17th. Your reservation is confirmed. The sabbatical she'd told her dealership managers about. The mental health break everyone agreed she needed. It would serve a different purpose now. Sarah called American Airlines, navigating the system with practiced efficiency. The morning flight could be moved to 6:45 a.m. First class available, 1 passenger. The home safe opened with a combination she'd never shared. Inside, organized in labeled folders, lay 15 years of documentation. Every loan with Brandon's signature promising to stop. Every casino statement she'd collected from his misplaced mail. Every credit card application he'd filed in secret. His text messages to friends, all printed and dated. She'll cave, she always does. Playing the concerned husband card tonight. The wife is basically a bank that gives head. That last one had been the turning point, discovered 6 months ago when his phone synced accidentally to their home computer. The moment Sarah stopped being his wife and became his escape plan. Sarah found an old Amazon box in the garage, ordinary and unremarkable. Inside, she arranged the documentation with an accountant's precision. First, the prenuptial agreement, page 23 highlighted. The gambling addiction clause his hungover lawyer had missed, the one that forfeited all marital assets if gambling debts exceeded $50,000. Brandon had crossed that threshold in year 2 of their marriage. Second, the complete debt history. Every payment, every bailout, every "last time I swear" that preceded the next disaster. Total, $1,247,000 over 15 years. Third, the legal separation papers James had prepared, waiting only for Sarah's signature and Brandon's service. On top, a USB drive containing 6 months of security footage. Their fights about money. His threats about consequences. His performances where tears became weapons. All captured in high definition by cameras Brandon didn't know existed. At the bottom, one note in Sarah's precise handwriting. You wanted it tomorrow. Here's what you're really getting. The packing took 45 minutes. 2 suitcases with tropical clothing, essential documents, medications. Sarah's dealership manager, Jake Martinez, received a detailed email. Family emergency requiring extended leave. You have full operational authority. Details to follow. Sarah stood in their bedroom, looking at the wedding photo Brandon had used as a prop tonight. She lifted the heavy frame off the nightstand, turned it to face the wall, and left it there. The blank canvas back seemed more honest. On her pillow, she placed her wedding ring. The 2-carat diamond Brandon had insisted on, purchased with Sarah's money from Sarah's first dealership sale. It had never really been his to give. The migraine had completely faded, replaced by something closer to anticipation. Sarah's phone showed 4 text messages from Brandon, probably from his brother's couch, already planning tomorrow's victory lap. She deleted them without reading. One final call, this time to her mother in Houston. Diana Mitchell answered immediately, as if she'd been waiting. Sarah, James called. Are you really doing this? Should have done it 15 years ago. He's your husband. Not a defense, just a statement of fact. He stopped being my husband the first time he chose poker over our marriage. I've just been too afraid to admit it. The Costa Rica property is ready. Villa stocked. I had the management company handle everything. Thank you, Mom. He'll try to find you. Let him try. By the time he opens that box, I'll be somewhere he can't chase me with sob stories and promises. They said goodbye without sentimentality. Diana had warned Sarah about Brandon from the beginning, seen through his charm to the addiction underneath. Mothers always know. At 11:30, Sarah stood in her kitchen, drinking water and studying the refrigerator. No children's artwork, no family photos. Just takeout menus and a calendar marking Brandon's poker tournaments. The life they'd never built because gambling left no room for anything else. She set the box on the kitchen table where Brandon would find it tomorrow. The security camera would capture his reaction at noon, expecting cash and finding instead the complete destruction of his assumptions. The alarm was set for 4:30. 6 hours until Sarah's new life began. 6.5 until Brandon's illusions shattered. The alarm cut through darkness at exactly 4:30 a.m. No snooze button, no hesitation. Sarah had trained herself over 20 years of dealership management to wake instantly, and today that discipline served a different purpose entirely. The coffee maker gurgled to life, already programmed. Colombian dark roast, the kind Brandon always complained was too bitter when he bothered coming home for breakfast. The ceramic mug warmed Sarah's hands, an anniversary gift from herself 5 years ago when Brandon forgot again. Through the kitchen window, Austin's skyline began its slow awakening, office buildings lighting up floor by floor. Somewhere out there, Brandon was sleeping at his brother's house in Round Rock, dreaming of the $500,000 he'd collect in 8 hours. Sarah moved through the house with forensic precision, documenting each room on her phone. The master bedroom where Brandon sighed still held clothes he'd probably never retrieve. His home office, converted from what should have been a nursery, filled with fantasy football guides and poker strategy books. The garage with his racing bike that cost $8,000 and had 73 miles on it. Everything purchased with Sarah's money, everything about to become his problem. The pool area looked serene in the pre-dawn light. Sarah had paid for the renovation last summer while Brandon was in Vegas for the World Series of Poker. He'd called it networking. The bank statements called it $32,000 in losses over 9 days. The Lexus purred to life in the garage. Sarah chose it over the Bentley. Brandon had too many memories in that car, too many assumptions about community property that had never been true. The streets of Westlake Hills lay empty except for newspaper delivery trucks beginning their routes. Sarah drove past Brandon's favorite haunts. The Velvet Room, still dark, where his business meetings happened. The country club where he'd been politely asked to stop playing in the card room after a violent outburst over a bad beat. Manuel's restaurant where he'd once thrown a fit because Sarah wouldn't extend his credit when his cards were declined. Mopac stretched ahead, nearly empty at 5 a.m. Sarah passed 3 of her dealerships, their lots full of inventory that would continue thriving without her for a month. Jake had earned this responsibility. The flagship location still had Sarah's photo in the lobby, her face smiling beneath the owner plaque. That woman looked confident, successful, in control. She'd been dying inside while that photo was taken, knowing she'd paid Brandon's bookies $50,000 the night before. Near 5th Street, Sarah noticed the casino boat dock, closed for renovation. Brandon had lost $60,000 there in one weekend, then convinced Sarah it was a business investment gone wrong. She'd believed him. She'd wanted to believe him. Love makes you stupid that way. James's office occupied the 42nd floor of the Frostbank Tower. At 5:30 a.m., the building stood mostly dark except for security and the obsessively ambitious. James waited in the conference room with Sophia Chun, his paralegal. Documents spread across mahogany with military precision. "You look surprisingly calm," James observed, sliding the separation agreement across the table. "First good night's sleep in months." Sarah signed with her Mont Blanc pen, the one Brandon had given her for their 10th anniversary. Paid for with her money, of course, but the sentiment had been nice. Asset freeze activates at midnight. All accounts in your name, all credit cards, all lines of credit. The house was always yours. The dealerships were always yours. The investments were always yours. Turns out you owned everything and he owned nothing. Sophia presented documentation with clinical efficiency. The interesting part, Mrs. Mitchell, is that Mr. Carter has no legal claim to anything. The prenup is ironclad. The gambling addiction clause on page 23, which his lawyer apparently never read, forfeits any potential claims given his documented debts exceeding $50,000. He crossed that threshold in year 2 of your marriage. The irony was perfect. While Brandon had been cultivating his poker face, Sarah had been building an empire he could never touch. The house he thought was theirs had always been hers. The cars, the club membership, the life he broadcast on social media. All hers. All revocable. All about to disappear. The nuclear option? Sarah asked. James produced a thicker folder. His complete gambling history. Casino surveillance footage from the Palms, the Bellagio, the Wynn, even that illegal game in Pflugerville. Credit card statements showing cash advances at gambling establishments. Text messages to his bookie discussing point spreads and lines. Promissory notes where he swore each time was the last. And the security footage from your home showing his threats last night. His mother? She'll receive a copy of everything if he tries to claim you abandoned him. Truth is, you escaped him. There's a difference. Sophia looked uncomfortable. Mrs. Mitchell, this is remarkably thorough. 15 years of documentation, Sarah replied. I kept hoping I'd never need it. Then I realized I was documenting because somewhere deep down, I always knew this day would come. James produced an identical Amazon box. Insurance. If he doesn't find yours, this goes to his brother's house Monday with these. Photos of Brandon at the casino last week. Timestamp clear, losses visible on his face. The Costa Rica property? Purchased through a Cayman entity 6 months ago. Completely protected. Even if Brandon gets ambitious with lawyers, he can't touch it. And between us, he can't afford a lawyer. Everything he thinks he has access to evaporates at midnight. Sarah signed the last document, her hand steady on Brandon's final severance from her life. 15 years dissolved with one signature. Bourbon? James gestured to his desk drawer where he kept the good stuff for moments like this. No, need a clear head for the flight. At 6 a.m. Sharp, Sarah stood and shook James's hand. His grip conveyed understanding, sympathy, and respect. The elevator descended alone, each floor marking distance from Sarah's old life, from the woman who confused rescue with love, from the wife who enabled her husband's destruction because leaving felt like failure. Highway 71 stretched toward Austin Bergstrom as the sun broke the horizon, painting the hills copper and gold. The familiar route felt different this morning, each landmark a goodbye. The Whole Foods where Brandon once had a meltdown because Sarah wouldn't give him $200 in cash. Manuel's taco truck setting up at Riverside, where Brandon had borrowed $50 from Manuel himself, never paid back. The luxury apartment complex where they'd lived before Sarah bought the house, before the addiction consumed everything. Brandon called 3 times in rapid succession, earlier than expected. Then his brother called once. Each ringtone felt like a countdown. Sarah let them all go to voicemail, not ready to hear the desperation, the manipulation, the promises that meant nothing. Mental inventory while merging onto 183. Jake had managed weekend operations for 3 years. He'd be fine. The property management company had instructions and 6 months advance payment. The lawyers had their directives. Everything else had ceased being Sarah's responsibility the moment she decided to save herself instead of him. The airport terminal emerged from morning mist. Sarah had made this drive hundreds of times for business trips, always with the weight of Brandon's next disaster pressing on her shoulders. Today felt light, felt like possibility. The valet stand wasn't busy yet. Tommy, who'd parked Sarah's cars for years, looked surprised. Early flight, Mrs. Mitchell? Change of plans. Sarah handed him the keys and an envelope. Jake Martinez will pick this up Monday. Everything all right. Better than it's been in years. Security moved with Friday morning efficiency. Sarah had TSA pre-check, moved through quickly. The regular agents recognized her. Where did today, Mrs. Mitchell? Somewhere warmer. Business or pleasure? Neither. Liberation. Austin Java appeared at gate 14. The barista smiled with morning enthusiasm. The usual medium dark roast? Large today. It's a special occasion. Sarah sat at the gate, the coffee warming her hands. Her phone showed its final statistics before she powered it completely off. 11 missed calls from Brandon, from his brother, 17 text messages. She read none of them, just powered down, removed the SIM card, and dropped both in the nearest trash bin. That version of Sarah Mitchell could become someone else's problem. First-class passengers for Flight 447 to San Jose, Costa Rica, now boarding. The gate agent scanned Sarah's boarding pass with a practiced smile. The jet bridge stretched ahead, each step lighter than the last. The flight attendant welcomed Sarah to 2A. She accepted the offered champagne, unusual for 7 a.m., perfect for this moment. Other passengers filed past. A young couple, probably honeymooners, giggling and touching. Sarah remembered being them once, before she understood that love without boundaries becomes imprisonment. A business traveler typed frantically on his laptop. That had been Sarah once, building an empire while her husband destroyed it from inside. An elderly woman settled in 3C with knitting and a peaceful expression Sarah envied. The captain's voice, "Ladies and gentlemen, we're ready for departure." The door closed with pneumatic finality. 7:05 a.m., pushback. 7:15 a.m., engines roaring. Acceleration pressing Sarah back into leather that didn't smell like Brandon's cologne or casino smoke. Austin shrank below. The hills and lakes Sarah had called home for 45 years becoming abstract geometry. Somewhere down there, Brandon was waking up at his brother's house. In 5 hours, he'd arrive at an empty house. In 6 hours, he'd find the box. In 7 hours, Sarah's old life would be completely dismantled, and Brandon would understand that his ATM had finally run out of currency. The flight attendant appeared with breakfast menus. Business or pleasure? Sarah considered the question. Neither. It's survival. Below, Texas disappeared under clouds. At exactly noon, when Brandon expected $500,000, Sarah would be having lunch above the Caribbean, finally free from the husband she'd loved and lost years before the money ran out. Sarah learned what happened next through security footage and witness reports James compiled. She watched it 3 days later from her Costa Rica balcony, Pacific waves providing oddly peaceful soundtrack to her husband's meltdown. The timestamp showed 11:47 a.m. when Brandon's Tesla pulled into their driveway. He'd stopped at Starbucks first, the charge hitting a credit card that was already suspended, though the weekend authorization wouldn't decline until Monday. His last purchase on Sarah's accounts, a $7 latte he'd never pay for. Mrs. Chun, their neighbor of 12 years, provided the first report. She called James at 11:50 a.m., speaking in her precise English. "Mr. Walker, he is here. The gambling husband. He does not know I am watching." The security footage picked up at 11 hours, 52 minutes, and 14 seconds. Brandon emerged from his Tesla wearing designer sunglasses and a golf shirt, both purchased with Sarah's money. He carried an empty Louis Vuitton briefcase, $12,000 retail, bought with money from Sarah's Christmas bonus. Empty, waiting for cash that would never come. He walked to the front door with the confidence of someone collecting an allowance. Rang the doorbell at 11 hours, 53 minutes, and 2 seconds. Normal ring, casual. Waited exactly 10 seconds, then rang again, harder this time. Brandon cupped his hands against the window, peering into the empty foyer. "Her car's gone," he said, loud enough for Mrs. Chun to hear from her garden. He tried his key at 11:54. It scraped against the lock, unable to find purchase. James's locksmith had changed them at 7 a.m., 3 hours after Sarah's flight departed. The confusion on Brandon's face made Mrs. Chun laugh from behind her rose bushes. Brandon spotted the box at 11 hours, 55 minutes, and 37 seconds. Just an Amazon package on the kitchen table, visible through the window. Unremarkable except for Brandon, written in black Sharpie across the top. He broke the back window at 11:56, reaching through to unlock the door. The alarm didn't sound. Sarah had disabled it remotely, wanting him to get inside, wanting him to find everything. The first document he pulled out was the prenuptial agreement, page 23 highlighted in yellow. The gambling addiction clause circled in red. His face changed like time-lapse photography, confusion to disbelief to horror in under 3 seconds. He dropped it, grabbed the spreadsheet. Every payment, every bailout, every debt. 15 years totaling $1,247,000. His hands shook as he reached the bottom line. The casino photographs came next. Brandon at the Palms last Tuesday, the win on Wednesday, the illegal game in Pflugerville on Thursday. Timestamps clear, his losses written on his face. Then the promissory notes, his signature bold and undeniable on each one. This is the last time, I swear. Dated and documented, proving the lie. At 11 hours 59 minutes and 17 seconds, Brandon's phone started buzzing. The credit card declines cascading. Chase Sapphire suspended. American Express invalid. Even his gas card deactivated. Everything, all at once, the infrastructure of his life collapsing. He tried calling Sarah at 12 o'clock, exactly when he'd expected to collect $500,000. Straight to voicemail. The generic message, not even her voice anymore. He called 17 times in 2 minutes, each attempt more desperate. Brandon found the USB drive at 12 hours 3 minutes and 44 seconds, plugged it into his laptop with trembling fingers. His own voice echoed from the speakers. She'll cave, she always does. Then last night's performance, his threats about serious people and consequences, all captured in high definition. The separation papers appeared last. Sarah's signature already there, waiting only for his service. 30 days to vacate the house that had never been his. Forfeiture of all assets due to gambling addiction clause. Zero claim to her business, her accounts, her life. Brandon collapsed onto the kitchen floor at 12 hours 6 minutes and 31 seconds, surrounded by scattered papers. Evidence of 15 years of manipulation, 15 years of addiction, 15 years of a wife who'd finally stopped saving him and started saving herself. Mrs. Chin called the police at 12:08. There is a man in my neighbor's house. Breaking and entering. Yes, I will stay on the line. The officers arrived at 12:23. Brandon was still on the floor, papers scattered around him like confetti from a funeral. They helped him up, verified his identity, saw the broken window and separation papers. Sir, this isn't your house. Says here you have 30 days to remove personal belongings with advance notice. Breaking the window is criminal damage. But she's my wife. Says here you're separated. And she's filed a protective order citing threats. You need to leave now. Brandon's brother arrived at 12:45, called by the police. He helped Brandon to his car, gathered some papers, left the rest. The wind would scatter them across the lawn by evening, neighbors collecting them like evidence of a crime scene. At exactly 12:30, when Brandon discovered his 15-year con had ended, Sarah was ordering ceviche from a beachfront restaurant. The waiter asked if she was celebrating. A divorce, Sarah told him. I am sorry, he said in accented English. Don't be. Best decision I ever made. James called that evening with the epilogue. Brandon had tried returning Sunday with a locksmith who refused the job once he verified ownership. He'd called Sarah's dealerships, but Jake had blocked him from the property. He'd contacted Sarah's mother, who told him exactly what she thought of men who gambled away their wives' futures. By Monday, Brandon had moved back to his brother's spare room in Round Rock. No money, no prospects, no wife to bail him out. For the first time in 15 years, Brandon Carter faced his addiction without a safety net. James sent the parking garage footage from Brandon's brother's apartment complex. Sarah watched it from her deck in Costa Rica, pelicans diving for fish, while her husband's life imploded on her laptop screen. The timestamp showed 7 p.m. March 16th, exactly when Sarah was having her first peaceful dinner in 15 years. Brandon's Tesla screeched into the underground parking, the car alarm triggering from how hard he slammed the door. His brother Eric met him at the elevator, expression clearly saying what he thought of this mess. The building's elevator had audio. James's investigators were thorough. How could she do this to me? Brandon's voice, shrill with betrayal. How could you do this to yourself? I warned you 5 years ago, man. Told you to get help. She knew about the debts. She always helped before. She enabled you before. There's a difference. The elevator dinged, doors closing on Brandon's denial. By 7:30, Brandon had started texting everyone in his contacts, a digital cry for help that James's team monitored in real time. High school friends who hadn't heard from him in years. College roommates he'd borrowed money from and never repaid. Even Sarah's business associates, asking if they knew where she'd gone. The responses ranged from confusion to satisfaction. Dude, you married an ATM and acted surprised when she closed the account? Heard you had a problem. Hope you get help. Don't contact me again. His mother called at 8 p.m., her voicemail preserved in legal files. "Brandon, what did you do?" "Sarah's lawyer sent me documents. 15 years of gambling. $1 million? How could you hide this from me?" The tone wasn't sympathy, but disgust. Even mothers have limits. Between 8:30 and 10 p.m., Brandon's search history told its own story. How to find wife who left. Can wife take everything in Texas divorce? Gambling addiction grounds for separation. Emergency loans no credit check. How to break prenuptial agreement. The progression from denial to desperation, documented in search terms. His bookie called at 10:15. That conversation, recorded on Brandon's phone and later subpoenaed, ended with, "Your credit's no good here anymore. Your wife was your credit. Now what VE you got?" What did he have? Sarah had spent 3 days creating an inventory. Nothing. Brandon Carter, at 43 years old, owned nothing. The clothes in his suitcase, purchased with Sarah's money. The phone in his hand, on Sarah's family plan. The Tesla outside, leased in Sarah's name. Even his wedding ring had been paid for by his bride. The credit card cascade started at exactly 10:47 p.m. Declined. Uber invalid. Even his Netflix account, tied to Sarah's credit card, displayed payment method unavailable. The infrastructure of his life, built entirely on someone else's foundation, collapsing all at once. Brandon's Facebook activity between 11 p.m. and midnight became Austin gossip legend. Each post deleted within minutes, but screenshots spread like wildfire. Betrayed by the person who promised forever. When your wife chooses money over marriage. Anyone know a good lawyer who works on contingency? The comments section filled immediately. His cousin. Didn't you empty her bank account for Vegas last year? High school friend. Thought Sarah paid for everything? College roommate. You still owe me $2,000 from 2015, bro. While Brandon's world burned, Sarah sat on her villa's deck with a glass of wine, watching the sunset paint the Pacific in oranges and purples. A local guitarist played nearby, and Sarah tipped him $100 to play whatever made him happy. For the first time in 15 years, Sarah's shoulders didn't carry the weight of someone else's addiction. Her phone didn't buzz with bookies calling. Her stomach didn't clench wondering which credit card would be maxed out next. Mrs. Chin called James again at 11:30 p.m. Brandon had returned to the house, sitting in his Tesla in the driveway. Not trying to enter, not raging. Just sitting, staring at dark windows like they might suddenly illuminate with forgiveness. He sat there for 2 hours, Mrs. Chun reported. When he finally left at 1:30 a.m., he looked different. Smaller. Like he finally understood. By midnight on March 16th, Brandon had lost access to $2.8 million in assets he'd never owned. Discovered $500,000 in gambling debts he couldn't pay. Realized his wife of 15 years had planned her escape for months. And learned his mother had received documentation of every lie he'd ever told. James asked if Sarah felt guilty about the timing, the precision, the complete dismantling of Brandon's assumptions. "I feel guilty about waiting so long," Sarah said, watching waves crash against volcanic rock. "I feel guilty about enabling his destruction for 15 years. I don't feel guilty about finally choosing myself." March 17th dawned with Costa Rican sunshine and howler monkeys in the trees. Sarah's first full day of freedom began with coffee on the deck, no anxiety about what disaster Brandon had created overnight. Meanwhile, Brandon woke on his brother's couch in Round Rock, surrounded by the papers he'd grabbed from the house. Evidence of his addiction spread across the coffee table like a crime scene. Eric stood in the doorway, coffee in hand, expression hard. "You've got 30 days here. Then you figure it out." "I need a lawyer." "With what money? Your credit cards are dead. Your bank account's empty. Even your Venmo is frozen." Brandon's desperation showed in his next move, calling every family member, every friend who might have cash. His uncle hung up after hearing loan. His college buddy laughed. His father, reached at a rehab facility where he'd been sober for 10 years, said, "Now you know how it feels." By noon, Brandon stood outside James Walker's office building, pressing the intercom every few minutes like a child, repeatedly pushing an elevator button. Security footage showed him there for 3 hours. James finally had security escort him out, along with a message. "Mrs. Mitchell has no interest in contact. All communication goes through her attorney. That's me. And I have nothing to say to you except read your separation papers." The job applications started March 18th. Brandon's LinkedIn activity showed applications to 47 positions in 1 week. Sales roles he wasn't qualified for. Management positions requiring experience he didn't have. Even retail jobs that took one look at his 15-year employment gap and passed. Finally, Enterprise Rent-A-Car called. They needed someone for the airport location. Starting pay, $14.50 an hour. Brandon's first job in 7 years, and it paid less than Sarah's dealership porter's maid. His first day was March 25th. James's investigator photographed Brandon in an Enterprise Polo, helping customers load luggage, checking mileage on returns. The same man who'd looked down on Sarah's employees now wore a name tag and said, "My pleasure," to people who barely noticed him. The apartment Brandon found took everything he made in a month. A studio in Pflugerville, same complex where the illegal poker game had cost him $30,000 last year. $950 monthly, cash only, no credit check. The landlord recognized him, smirked, took his money. March 30th brought the official divorce filing. Sophia hand-delivered it to Enterprise, making Brandon sign in front of his manager and coworkers. Grounds: abandonment of marital duties, gambling addiction clause violation, irretrievable breakdown. His manager called him into the office afterward. "This going to affect your work?" "No, sir." But it did. Brandon's first week performance review cited lack of focus, poor customer interaction, general malaise. He was working for the first time in his adult life, and it showed. The creditors found him April 2nd. Not bank representatives, but 2 men in Italian suits who knew exactly where he worked. They waited by his car after his shift. "Mr. Carter, we need to discuss your outstanding obligation." "I don't have it." "We're aware. Your wife was your collateral. Now you have none. That's a problem." They left a business card with just a phone number. No threats, no violence. They didn't need to threaten. Brandon knew what happened to people who owed serious money to serious people. That night, Brandon sat in his studio apartment, eating ramen on a hot plate, and finally called the number he'd avoided for 15 years. Gamblers Anonymous met Tuesday and Thursday nights at the Lutheran Church on Burnett Road. He walked in April 4th, sat in the back, listened to stories that sounded exactly like his own. Divorced, broke, desperate. Everyone there had lost everything. Most were further along in recovery. Brandon was just starting. The leader approached after the meeting. "First time? Yes. Keep coming back. It works if you work it." April 10th brought Brandon's rock bottom, though he'd thought he'd hit it already. The creditors returned, this time to his apartment. He came home to find them sitting on his stoop, patient as death. "We have a proposal. You work for us. Deliveries, collections, errands. Pays your debt in 4 years." "What kind of deliveries?" "The kind that don't get asked about." Brandon almost said yes. Almost traded one addiction for another, gambling debts for criminal enterprise. Then he remembered Sarah's face the night he'd demanded the money, the exhaustion, the finality. She'd chosen herself over his destruction. Could he do less? "No. I'll figure something else out." They stood, left without argument. They'd be back. They always came back. April 15th, Brandon sat in the Gamblers Anonymous meeting and spoke for the first time. "My name is Brandon, and I'm a compulsive gambler." The room responded, "Hi, Brandon. I've been gambling since college. Started with fantasy football, moved to poker, ended with sports betting that cost me my marriage, my home, everything. My wife just left me. Disappeared to another country because I destroyed our life with my addiction. I blamed her for leaving. Now I understand she saved herself because I couldn't." Applause. Recognition. Understanding from people who'd walked the same path. The sponsor who approached him afterward was Tom, 62, sober from gambling for 20 years. "The hardest thing you'll ever do is admit you can't save yourself. Sounds like your wife learned that first." Brandon broke down right there in the church basement, crying in front of strangers, finally acknowledging what 15 years of denial had hidden. He wasn't an entrepreneur or a businessman or a victim of bad luck. He was an addict who'd used his wife as an ATM until she'd finally run out of currency and sympathy. The letters to Sarah started April 16th. Brandon wrote them at his sponsor's suggestion, not to send, but to process. 15 pages of apology, acknowledgement, understanding. Everything he should have said years ago, when words might have mattered. Tom read them and shook his head. "Don't send these. Not yet. Maybe never." She didn't leave because she wanted apologies. She left because apologies meant nothing when you kept gambling. Show her through actions, not words. If you're lucky, in 5 or 10 years, maybe she'll care that you changed. But don't change for her. Change for yourself. April 30th, Brandon celebrated 1 month gambling free. His first milestone, marked with a plastic chip from GA and recognition from people who understood what it meant. 1 month of driving past casinos without stopping. 1 month of deleted betting apps. 1 month of facing life without the escape gambling provided. He'd lost 30 pounds, not from exercise but from stress and the minimum wage diet he could afford. His face looked different, older, but clearer somehow. The fog of addiction lifting to reveal the damage underneath. James sent Sarah monthly updates, clinical reports she read from her villa deck. Subject has maintained employment at Enterprise. Attending Gamblers Anonymous meetings twice weekly. Creditors have not returned. Subject has had no contact with gambling establishments per investigator surveillance. Sarah read them without emotion, not rooting for Brandon's failure, but not invested in his success either. His recovery was his responsibility, just as her healing was hers. May brought Sarah's own revelations. The stress headaches that had plagued her for years completely disappeared. Her blood pressure dropped 30 points. She'd stopped grinding her teeth at night. Her body was healing from 15 years of absorbing someone else's addiction. She started volunteering at a local women's shelter, teaching financial literacy to women escaping abusive relationships. Economic abuse, she learned, took many forms. Sometimes it was a husband controlling all money. Sometimes it was a husband destroying all money. The women in her classes understood that difference intimately. How did you know when to leave? One woman asked during a session in late May. When I realized I was choosing his addiction over my sanity, Sarah answered. When enabling him felt like loving him. When I understood that saving him meant destroying myself. The woman started crying. I'm not ready. I wasn't ready for 15 years. Then one day I was. You'll know when. June 1st marked Sarah's official 3-month mark in Costa Rica. The villa had become home. Local kids called her Miss Sarah, teaching her Spanish in exchange for English lessons. The grocery store owner saved her favorite coffee beans. The beach bar guitarist knew her drink order. She'd built a life, finally, that belonged only to her. Brandon's letter arrived June 5th, forwarded by James with a note. He's been writing these monthly. This is the first one different enough to forward. Your call. Sarah set it aside for 2 days, then read it on the beach at sunset. Sarah, I'm writing this from my apartment in Pflugerville. I know you probably won't read it. I know I don't deserve your time or attention or forgiveness. I'm not writing to ask for any of those things. I'm writing because my sponsor says I need to acknowledge what I did, the damage I caused, the person I became. I was an addict who used you as both enabler and ATM. I blamed you for enabling me while demanding you do exactly that. I threatened you when you hesitated. I manipulated you with love language and marriage vows. I took everything you built and gambled it away, then asked for more. I convinced myself I was the victim in our marriage, that you didn't understand me, that you were controlling with money. The truth is you were protecting yourself from an addict who would have destroyed everything if you'd let him. You finally stopped letting me. I'm 3 months sober from gambling. Working at Enterprise, making $14.50 an hour. Living in a studio apartment where my neighbors deal drugs and fight at 3 a.m. It's everything I deserve. I attend GA meetings twice a week. I work with a sponsor. I avoid casinos and betting apps in the Velvet Room. For the first time in 15 years, I'm facing life without the escape gambling provided. It's harder than anything I've ever done. This isn't me asking for another chance. You gave me hundreds of chances I destroyed. This is me acknowledging that you were right to leave, right to protect yourself, right to choose your sanity over my addiction. I hope you're happy wherever you are. I hope you're healing from the damage I caused. I hope someday you can think of our marriage and not feel only pain. I'm sorry. That word means nothing coming from me. But it's all I have. Brandon. Sarah read it twice, then set it down on the sand. The sun had started its descent, painting everything gold and orange. A family played in the surf, children laughing, parents relaxed. Normal people living normal lives, unburdened by addiction and codependency. She didn't cry, didn't feel anger or vindication or even satisfaction. Just a distant sadness for two people who destroyed each other in different ways. Him through addiction, her through enabling it. Sarah called James that evening. Tell him I received the letter. Any response? Tell him I'm glad he's getting help. Tell him recovery takes years, not months. Tell him to stay focused on himself, not on me. That's generous. It's realistic. His recovery isn't about me. Mine isn't about him. We're finally separate, the way we should have been years ago. June 15th, Sarah returned to Austin. Not to the Westlake house, which had sold in April for $1. $2 million. Not to find Brandon or check his progress. She returned to her business, her life, her city, fundamentally changed. She bought a condo downtown, modern and minimal, nothing like the house she'd shared with Brandon. One bedroom, because she didn't need more. One parking space, because she didn't need more. One life, entirely her own. The dealerships had thrived under Jake's management, proving Sarah's business had never needed her constant attention. She'd been there obsessively because going home to Brandon had felt like walking into a casino. Same anxiety, same certain loss. She promoted Jake to COO in July, taking a step back from daily operations. Started teaching financial literacy courses at UT. Joined the board of the Gambling Addiction Foundation. Turned her pain into purpose, her experience into education. Brandon sent monthly letters documenting his recovery. 6 months sober. 1 year sober. Promoted to assistant manager at Enterprise. Moved to a better apartment. Still attending GA meetings. Still working with his sponsor. Sarah read them all but responded to none. His recovery was his journey. She'd traveled too far on her own path to return to his. August 2026, 18 months after Sarah left, they encountered each other by accident at Central Market. Brandon was there buying groceries, Sarah picking up coffee. They saw each other across the produce section, both froze. Sarah approached because running felt like giving him power he no longer held. Brandon. Sarah. He looked different, older but healthier. 40 pounds lighter, eyes clear. You look good. I am good. You? 18 months sober. Still working. Still going to meetings. I'm glad. Silence settled. Not uncomfortable. Just the silence of two people who'd shared 15 years and now shared nothing. I'm sorry, Brandon said quietly. For everything. For the person I was. For what I did to you. I know. I read your letters. I didn't think you did. I did. I just wasn't ready to respond. Maybe I still won't be. Your recovery is yours, Brandon. It can't be about me or us or what was. It has to be about you. My sponsor says the same thing. Your sponsor is right. They stood there surrounded by organic vegetables and artisanal cheese, two people who'd built and destroyed a marriage, now strangers shopping for dinner. I'm proud of you for getting help, Sarah said finally. Really, addiction is hell, and recovery is harder. But this doesn't change anything between us. I know. I'm not asking it to. I just needed you to know I'm trying. Try for yourself, not for me. That's when it'll work. They parted without drama, without hope of reconciliation, without anything except quiet acknowledgement of how far they'd both traveled from who they'd been. Sarah drove home to her condo, made dinner for one, sat on her balcony overlooking the city. Tomorrow she'd teach her financial literacy class. Next week she'd fly back to Costa Rica for a month. Next month she'd attend the grand opening of her 4th dealership. Her life stretched ahead, full of possibility, unburdened by anyone else's addiction. Brandon drove back to his apartment, cooked dinner on his hot plate, attended his GA meeting, shared about seeing Sarah, about how far he'd come, about how far he still had to go. His sponsor asked, "You hoping for reconciliation?" "No. I'm hoping to deserve it someday, even if it never comes." That's the difference between 3 months sober and 18 months sober. The room nodded, understanding that addiction recovery wasn't about winning back what you'd lost. It was about becoming someone who deserved not to lose it in the first place. Sarah never took Brandon back. The divorce finalized in December 2026, amicable as divorces go when there's nothing to fight about. He signed the papers at his apartment. She signed them at her lawyer's office. They never saw each other again. Brandon continued his recovery, eventually managing an enterprise location, speaking at GA meetings, helping new members navigate the early darkness of sobriety. He dated occasionally but told them all up front, "I'm a recovering gambling addict. That will always be part of who I am. If you can't handle that reality, let's not waste each other's time." Most couldn't. That was fair. Sarah never remarried. Dated occasionally, enjoyed male companionship, but never again confused rescue with love, never again sacrificed her sanity to someone else's addiction. Years later, asked if she regretted leaving the way she did, Sarah's answer never wavered. I regret staying as long as I did. I regret enabling his addiction for 15 years. I don't regret finally choosing myself. That choice saved my life. Brandon, asked the same question, responded, she had every right to leave. I'm grateful she did it when I still had time to change. Some addicts don't get that chance. Two people who destroyed each other, finally separate, finally healing, finally understanding that sometimes love isn't enough when addiction is involved. Sometimes the greatest act of love is refusing to participate in someone's self-destruction, even when that someone is your husband, even when leaving feels like failure. Sarah had learned the hardest lesson of all. You can't save someone who won't save themselves. But you can save yourself. And sometimes, that's the only salvation possible. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.